feel like my washing machine's about to go off and I'm gonna have to hang out these sheets. Anyway, the main thing that there it is. Hello, welcome to my channel, Comments and Ampersands. My name is Sarah, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get the most out of your library. February is Library Lovers Month, I think, or something to do with libraries at any rate, and I just wanted to share the love for libraries. And I also wanted to share answers to some of the very frequent questions that I get on Instagram about how I use my library and why I think it's so great. This video may not be useful to everyone. Maybe a lot of the things that I talk about will be very specific to my library or to my country or to my reading preferences, but I do get these questions so often that I feel like I just want a video to address some of that so I can direct people here. I am a big advocate for using your local library. I know that it differs across the world. Some libraries you have to pay a membership fee for, some you have to pay a couple of dollars to borrow a book out, some you might have to pay a couple of dollars until you bring the book back, I think somebody once told me. But more often than not, a library is a really cost-effective way to try out new books, try out new authors, and to really share a general love of reading. Most people know you can get physical books out from your library. There are plenty of people I know of on Instagram who post pictures of library books, who mainly use their libraries, but for some reason don't feel comfortable sharing the fact that it's a library book. So they will like Photoshop out the little sticker, or they will Photoshop the cover on so that they don't get this glare or whatever. And from an aesthetic point of view, I understand that because it can be difficult to work around the glare of like the protective covering on these books. But I don't know why there's some kind of stigma attached to borrowing books from a library. You don't have to be able to afford books to be a book lover. You don't have to have a massive library to be a book lover. That is a ridiculous assumption and a ridiculous standard to set when you just want to share the love of reading. Whether that is through a library book or an ebook or an audiobook or whatever. That's just something that I feel very strongly about. I don't often borrow physical books from my library. I note that as I am saying that, I'm sitting directly in front of a pile of physical books from my library. And I got them out because I wanted to have like a pink theme in February, as I usually do, and I don't have a lot of pink books, so I needed to fill out the space somehow, and I just got a bunch of books from my library for that purpose. So that's why they're there. Although there are actually a couple in there that I do want to read. When it comes to my own personal reading experience, I much prefer using ebooks and audiobooks. And my job that I'm in at the moment requires me to bring my work laptop home, sometimes multiple times a week, depending on what's going on. I don't have a lot of room in my bag for a physical book, which is why I now have a Kobo and why I prefer to listen to audiobooks on my phone. And you can get ebooks and audiobooks from your local library. So let us first start on ebooks. I used to have a Kindle Paperwhite, and that worked fine, but I didn't use it much because when I got it, I specifically said to the salesperson, am I going to be able to read ebooks from my library on this? And he was like, oh yeah, they do it in America all the time, and they're definitely coming up with the technology to be able to do it in Australia. And I was like, cool, so I'll get the Kindle Paperwhite and then I'll be able to use all of the ebooks from my library and I'll be able to just read them on there and I won't have to have the backlight or anything like that. That was in 2014. It's now 2020, and the last time I checked, I still couldn't download ebooks from my library directly onto my Kindle. And that seems to be because Australian libraries tend to prefer a partnership with Rakuten, which is the company that creates Kobo and is also the company that created two apps. One's called Overdrive and one's called Libby. And they are the apps that libraries in Australia most frequently use to loan out ebooks. So because they are made by the same company, with my Kobo, I can browse through my library catalogue, download a book, put a book on hold, whatever, and it'll just sync straight up. And I have that book on my Kobo immediately. I don't have to convert it, I don't have to do weird things with it or anything like that. It's just seamless. And since I got my Kobo, I feel like that has helped me to read more, and it also helped me to tackle some of the really big books on my TBR that I was too uncomfortable carrying around because they were too heavy for my bag. So you can do that if you're borrowing directly from Overdrive or Libby. They're basically the same app, by the way. Libby's just like a newer version of it. It's a little bit more fancy and it's a little bit less glitchy than Overdrive, I find. But if you go into your library catalogue and it says a book is available as an ebook, it will usually tell you what app you need to read or download that content. The main apps that my library uses for ebooks are Overdrive/Libby and also BorrowBox. Now, BorrowBox doesn't allow you to download directly onto your Kobo, which is fine. All you need to do is plug your Kobo into a laptop or a computer or whatever, download it, drag it onto your Kobo, it's done. It takes about 3 minutes, and that's including the time it takes for my computer to start up. It's so simple. After struggling with my Kindle and my library and wanting to do anything for ages, I still am not over how simple this is, and if my Kindle had been able to do this years ago, I would have just continued using that until I died, but it didn't, so I had to swap. The difference between the two apps tends to just be the kind of content. I found that BorrowBox tends to have a little bit more Australian content perhaps, whereas Overdrive will sometimes have like the big international series titles. They're both pretty easy to use. There are a few differences between them, but oftentimes if your library is associated with those apps, it will have a little bit of an instruction or guide on its website that says like, here's how you download a book, here's what you do. Or it's very easy to Google. I have never had an issue with finding the specific information that I need to operate Overdrive, Libby, or BorrowBox. If you don't have an issue with reading with a backlight on your phone or something, you can download Overdrive, Libby, BorrowBox directly onto your phone and you can read at your leisure. You don't have to do anything else. And now to audiobooks. Overdrive/Libby and BorrowBox both have audiobooks available on them. And so does another app that my library often uses, which is called RB Digital. That one I think tends to have more romance and thriller books on it. It also has magazine content, but most of the audiobooks that I have wanted to try out have either been on BorrowBox or Libby, so I don't have as much experience with RB Digital. From memory, that app is a little bit clunkier in general, but it's still a perfectly acceptable way to listen to your audiobooks, and I just then have to remember the differences between the apps when I switch over to using one or the other. Audiobooks are something that I will never stop raving about, especially audiobooks that are available from your library. It's just so easy to listen to a book on your mobile phone or on whatever device you are using while you are walking somewhere, while you are washing the dishes, while you are hanging out laundry, while you are doing whatever the heck you're doing. It is so easy to listen to an audiobook. It does take some getting used to, and one thing that I would recommend if you're just starting out using audiobooks is to figure out what your reading speed is. When I first started reading audiobooks, I had this issue where my attention would wander because the narrator was a lot slower than I had expected, and that meant that I was just kind of thinking about a bunch of different things, and they'd be like, oh crap, like half an hour has passed and I haven't taken anything in. And one way that I found to counteract that was to read along with the physical book in my hands and to see what pace it was, and you can adjust the speed of the narrator to like 1.25 speed, 1.5 speed, 1.75 speed. Like, you can adjust it as you need and the narrator will just speed up, and eventually you're going to find that sweet spot where you're listening to the book and you're paying attention to it and your mind's not wandering. That's my experience anyway. And it is different for each audiobook narrator. Some people naturally speak a little bit faster, some people naturally speak a little bit slower. So I usually range anywhere from between like 1.25 speed to 2.5 speed, depending on who I'm listening to. If your library doesn't have something that you're really interested in reading, maybe also see if they can order it in. Librarians tend to want to know what you want to read because they want to know which books are going to get borrowed. I've had a bunch of books that I have recommended to my library and that have ended up being purchased, and then I can access them through my library because there's enough of a demand from myself and from other people who are interested in that book that they go, yeah, it's worth having on our shelves. So if there's something that you see and they don't have, just ask a librarian if you can request it and how you go about doing that. Oftentimes, it's very simple. I'm not really sure how libraries are run in other places, but in Australia it tends to be that if you have a library, it's run by that city's council. And in Queensland, where I live, we are lucky enough to have like quite large council areas. So the Brisbane City Council actually covers an amazing array of suburbs, like a quite ridiculous amount. And then you've got the Logan City Council and the Ipswich City Council. And what libraries in my area at least tend to do is, if you live or work in an adjoining council area, they'll just let you join the other one. Or they may allow you to have a partial membership so that you can download ebooks and audiobooks, but they're not worried about you using physical books and then like leaving and not bringing them back. So you may be able to use more than one library around you. I know that in Sydney they have councils that are a lot smaller, but you may still be able to get at least an online membership. It's worth checking out. I'm a member of two libraries, the Brisbane one and the Logan one, and each of them have multiple branches. So they have a physical catalogue that is spread out amongst a whole heap of other libraries, and if I want a physical book, I can request for it to be brought from bloody whoop whoop and brought to the library that's closest to me. Depending on which library you're part of, they may charge you a small fee for that, but it also means that I have a bigger range to choose from. I'll first check at Brisbane. If they don't have it, I'll check at Logan, and I would say 90% of the time I have been able to get the book that I want from either of those two libraries. So it definitely is worth seeing if you can join up another library and seeing if you can access their catalogue. Someone messaged me about this the other day actually. I have a page tracker that I use on Instagram, and I put up how many pages I've read each day, and I had mentioned that I had listened to a lot of audiobooks but I still had the pages in there, and someone messaged me and said, how are you keeping track of these pages? I only have like the hours that I've listened to. If I'm listening to an audiobook on like Audible or even from my library, I'll just get out a physical copy of a book from my library and I will just check where I am and go, oh, I've just gotten up to chapter 8 on my audiobook, and I will find chapter 8, stick a bookmark in there, look at the page number, and that is how I track my pages. If you don't want to track your pages, of course you don't have to, but that's something that a couple of people have asked me and they're like, oh, I've never thought of doing that before, maybe I should give that a go. So yeah, that is another way that I tend to use my library. And I can't believe I nearly forgot to mention library events. The libraries that I'm a part of, for example, have something on almost every day for kids, parents, seniors, school children, university students. There's a lot of free events, there's a lot of low cost events, and oftentimes a writers festival in your area will reach out to local libraries and it will have them host some of the smaller events with authors, because it tends to be a free event space and it also gets people into the library. There are so many cool things on your library that you can check out, and they usually have them listed on their website. But for our book club, we also go to a library and hire out a room every single month just to sit there and chat for a few hours. Like, there are a lot of resources in there. Libraries will often have computer bays where you can access the internet. I've had a couple of assignments that I needed to fix, so I went into the library and used my USB. Some of the libraries even have like a freaking Xbox and PlayStation for the kids to play with. There's kids out there playing Minecraft when I walk in, and there is so much going on there that people just don't think about, because they sit there and go, oh, I don't need a library book, I'll just go and buy something, and then they don't realize like what their library actually does. It's not the old place that you used to go to where a librarian would just like shush you every time you made a sound. It's much more of a community experience. You can meet new people who love books as well. You can go to different events that suit your interests. You can try out different things for free or for a low cost. Like, I cannot recommend libraries enough. I think that's definitely all of the stuff that I use my library for now. I've probably forgotten something else. But if there's something that I haven't covered, or you want a little bit more information about something that I've mentioned, by all means leave me a comment and I will get back to you. As is probably clear from this video, I love my library and I love to talk about my library and the benefits that it can bring you. So I would be more than happy to chat about it and help you find some more love and appreciation for your library as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!